Okay, welcome back to the Modern Revolution. I appreciate you guys coming back for another episode. My name's Pete Deely, and the divine continues to put wonderful people in our path and get a chance to talk with people that I would not otherwise find. And I'm so lucky to get to do so. We don't tell you that you should listen to them by virtue of their expertise and their experiences. Instead, we encourage you just to listen. And then if they intrigue you and you want to learn more about them, then we'll tell you where you can find out about them. So this way you can use your own opinion, your own judgment, your own intuition as to who you want to learn more about and who maybe you just were glad you spent an hour with. All right. So with that today, we have Kristin Rivas. And Kristin, thank you so much for spending some time with us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's nice to
Yeah,
be here.
it's our pleasure. So, Kristin, we like to start with the general idea about what problem are you trying to solve in the world? Where, as you bring your energy out into the world and you're trying to do good things, what problem are you working on or problems?
Yeah, thanks for asking. I feel like my life's purpose is to help make sure people know that it's possible that they don't have to live their life with suffering.
Hmm.
And probably the where my life story and mission most align with that is that many people have gone through really challenging, traumatic experiences, and I think it's bad enough that bad things happen in life. But what is really sorry is that those things continue to haunt people
Right.
even after they're over.
Sure.
So even after they have survived something really difficult and
Right.
overcome something. So there's many, many different ways that people can heal from traumatic experiences and heal their body, so they're improve their mental health, and I feel like that's the reason why I'm here and what I'm up to. What my whole life revolves around is making sure people, um, can live their life free from suffering with more peace and joy and purpose.
So, in a sense, tell me if I'm tracking along what you're saying, is that the past has echoes into the present and the future, and that sometimes if the past is bad, it's hurtful, damaging, releasing yourself from the past is hard. And I think all of us experience that in both small and big ways. You get a slight in the course of the day, and you might not let that go, right? You're like, a person said it, and you're in an argument with that person once that person has left you. Uh, so
Mm,
in larger contexts, you can go through something awful and that thing can
mhm.
have an echo across the way. However, if you don't release yourself from the thing, then you're doomed to sort of live in the past rather than in the present and the future. I mean, am I kind of following what you're saying?
I think, yeah, there what comes to mind to say based on what you just shared is that I think a lot of people do have the impression that Uh, if they can just make a conscious decision, like,
Hmm.
if it's like they haven't decided enough well enough that they have to let something that their job is to let something go,
Hmm.
that they have to decide to now think and feel a certain way, and there are some times where people, for whatever reason, they make a powerful enough conscious decision, and it
Right.
shifts their thought patterns, and it shifts the way that their mind and their bodies react and respond to things, and there are times when people really want change to happen and they
Hmm.
want to let something go. They want to release something from their mind and their body, and it just hasn't been happening. And
Yeah.
that's what happened to me. So
Okay.
like I um I suffered from a very, very debilitating illness that
Mm.
today is known as functional neurological disorder. It used to be known back when I got diagnosed by the Mayo Clinic in Jacksonville, Florida in 2009. The illness was known as conversion disorder.
Okay.
Um, it's one in every I think it's like about 200,000 people a year that get diagnosed with this illness over the whole globe. And like how some people after surviving trauma, they might develop panic attacks or nightmares.
Right.
I had that stuff plus non-epileptic seizures.
Okay. Okay.
So stuff that resembled like grand mal epilepsy, things that resembled like somebody having Tourette's, narcolepsy, something called dystonia, catalepsy. Like basically, there was so much neurological dysfunction that my muscles were haywiring. I would even sometimes go blind while I
Oh
was
my
conscious,
goodness.
just
That's just
spontaneously.
this is
I know.
so this is your life post the disease. So what was
No,
it like when
I
this
know.
is in the course of having it. Okay, this is
During
how the
yeah,
symptoms that presented while you had functional neurological
correct.
syndrome. Okay, okay,
When before I recovered, which I've been recovered for 15 years.
okay.
So for 2 almost 2 years, I struggled, like, all of a sudden, one day, I was laughing and joking with a friend, a
Right.
girlfriend that I had been roommates with. We were doing laundry, and I started to feel the symptoms of, like, a stroke, and I
Oh
lost
my
consciousness,
goodness.
and all I know, and then I went to the emergency room, the doctors had no idea what the heck had just happened to me. Every test came back normal, and they were
Right.
like, it's really rare, but sometimes people react this way to stress. Have you had stress?" And I'm like, "Ha, I'm only taking 18 credit hours working to pay my way through school,
Right.
leading Bible studies, all kinds of stuff." And my sister died from a drunk driver, like, 3 years ago,
Mhm.
and they were like, "Well, it could what you just happened could be from that."
Right.
And I was like, "What?"
Right.
I think you guys just don't know what you're talking about. It happened this episode of all these symptoms happened again the next day, and then a few more times that week, and then it got worse and worse over the coming months. I became, a patient of a research hospital, the Mayo Clinic in Jacksonville, Florida, for almost a year. They were have you ever seen that show House?
Yeah, sure, sure.
You know what
Yeah.
I mean? They have these tough cases and the team of people trying to figure out what the heck's going on. That was my life for, like, a year,
Wow. Oh my goodness.
and I know, it was really crazy. I ended up being in a wheelchair wearing a helmet. So I was having these non-epileptic seizures up to 9 times a day. Somebody with grand mal epilepsy, they could give them a shot of something called Ativan, and it'd stop their seizure. I could keep going,
Okay.
and, um,
Even after the
basic
Ativan. So they give you the shot of Ativan, you're like, "Psh, that's all you got?" Yeah,
I
you
don't know.
just
Yeah,
yeah,
I don't know.
yeah,
It was
right,
like it
yeah.
caused more seizures. It
Oh
was
my
it
goodness.
was
Yeah.
awful. But, like so I ended up having to drop out of school, and you know what? Like, for me, the thing that I hated the most, that I feared the most ended up happening, which is I had been trying to be as busy as possible to not process my sister's death and
Hmm.
stuff that had happened over the course of my upbringing, like, basically almost spiritual trauma, being raised a pastor's daughter and stuff.
Okay,
Like,
okay.
it had
Yeah,
an effect. Um, and my sister was kicked out of the house for being gay, like, a
okay,
couple of years before her well, she had to move out of the house on the day of her 18th birthday, and a few months later is when she died from the drunk driver,
okay.
right? And so there was these things that I did my best to pray away, and I don't know, just I tried. I would say I gave it my best effort to decide not to be angry.
Right,
And one of the ways that I attempted to do that was by not focusing on it and filling my life with giving to other people, giving of my time, being a good student.
right.
And yet my dreams were filled with rage.
Okay,
Like,
okay, okay. So it's in there.
it was in there, and then, um, I tried under the Mayo Clinic recommendation during the whole time of them trying to figure out how to help me. I tried 6 different kinds of therapy. I tried every, like, medication. I ended up drinking, like, Chinese herbal tonics that tasted I mean, I tried, like, so
You
much
tried it
stuff.
all. Right.
And then, um, basically a family friend told my family, "Hey, there's a hypnotherapist that I saw that helped me stop smoking cigars." But
Okay.
he actually helps his main specialty is helping people recover from PTSD.
Okay. So just to take a step back, like so
Yeah,
you have you have a condition that you don't know you have, and then you get stressed out past your ability to accommodate that stress. And as you go past your limits, this condition, which
Mhm.
must have some genetic component to it, right? Like it's not a virus, it's not a bacteria, I presume. So something in your body goes, well, this is how we'll deal with this. We're going to just kind of shut you down then. If you're not going to shut down, we'll shut you down. And then you have, I mean, whatever your body is trying to tell, I don't know what your body's trying to tell you, but it's trying to say whatever you're doing is not working. Your dreams, your brain is like
Yeah.
creating opportunities for you to be angry that your life doesn't allow for. And your body's like taken over by whatever's going on. And then you try to create a solution yourself based on your willpower is kind of what it sounds like. Like, well, you know what? Lord helps those who help themselves. I will crush this out of my life via my willpower, but that's
Yeah.
insufficient too. Okay, so if I'm following the story correctly, now
Yeah.
we've come to somebody who's seeking to unlock something different. So, okay, so what happens next?
Yeah, so I go to this hypnotherapist that had tons of amazing raving testimonials.
Okay.
I mean, he had helped survivors of the September 11th terrorist attacks.
Wow.
They were like people were like, "I do not know what kind of magic happened, but I had, like, 1 to 4 sessions with this guy, and I feel a peace that I haven't felt in years, maybe
Okay.
ever. I can't be angry or sad or guilty or ashamed anymore." And I just decided to see what would happen if I had a session with him.
Right.
And so that was on June 20th of 2009, and it was a 2-hour and 20-minute long session, and most of it was conversational.
Right.
Um, it was fascinating, it was interesting, it was uplifting, it was funny, I laughed most of the time.
Mhm.
The last 20 minutes is when my eyes were closed, when people would have said, "Oh, now that guy's doing the hypnosis," and he
Okay.
said nice things to me with my eyes closed. The whole thing was, changing how my mind, my
Mhm.
subconscious mind, those parts of the brains, how they process information, like memory,
Uh,
imagination, what things mean, how it
okay.
responds to certain stimulus,
Mhm.
right? So he was, like, helping to rewire my neural pathways and retrain my nervous system in these different kinds of ways,
Right.
in such a way that it was almost most of it was invisible to me. I didn't even understand. I was like, "Huh, I can't feel angry anymore now if I try." It was awesome. And
So, I mean, just to like to understand what you just said. So, in the course of just conversation, just
yeah.
somebody talking to you, that conversation created um, a new way of your physical brain, um, of their physical brain operating. And that's pretty powerful. So, I mean, we're talking about
Yeah.
the power of, well, I don't know. I mean, is it just the words or is there other things going on here?
Well, I don't know if you've ever heard of something called, like, neurolinguistic programming, but a hypnotist or NLP facilitator and Dr. John Connolly's rapid resolution therapy, that was born from those kinds of modalities. Like, he has
Okay.
invented his own techniques and all kinds of stuff, like,
Okay.
but basically, uh, s that person has their words, their ideas, the pace, the rhythm they speak, their facial expressions, their hand gestures, timing, um, to with, like, almost surgical precision, get some but, like, have it have an impact so that somebody has, like, a positive epiphany, like,
Okay.
somebody has an insight, a breakthrough, somebody, um, is so emotionally now impacted from that conversation, like,
Right.
even their logical mind, their emotional mind, their the parts of their brain that are in control over physical processes,
Hmm.
that it's retrained their mind how to think of things and react and respond to things. And the fact that it can be done with mainly just words and gestures and tonality is pretty amazing. Like,
Yeah. I mean, I think about. how it feels when I've listened to great speeches, which I realize isn't a perfect analogy. However,
It's
and I
similar though.
when I first heard the Martin Luther King "I Have a Dream" speech, there was something that I felt in the presence of those words, the presence of that person's delivery. Exactly, that interacted with me beyond just understanding what he was saying, beyond the content. And I've been in circumstances where I have felt led, right? Somebody's telling me to do something, talking to me, and I am feeling compelled to do what they're suggesting. So when I think about what you're talking about in an ordinary sense, right? And I think in maybe the most simple example might be a really good motivational speaker. But in the context of like, oh, you're there, and this person's uplifting you. Um, and clearly, when we look at maybe less positive sides of that, you look at
Mhm.
people who are, if you're heading in a good direction, I think it's leadership. If you're heading in a bad direction, it's manipulation. I mean, that's
Yeah.
it's maybe an oversimplification, but clearly people listening to Hitler are moved in a similar manner. I mean, he's rewiring
Yeah.
ideas, opinions in a way that's
Yeah.
destructive, but it's the force of his words and him that's undeniable. I mean that.
The ideas being presented, how you harness emotions for people like anger and fear and hate in the
Right.
negative sense, or how you can harness a sense of like wisdom
Yeah.
and clarity and love
Hmm.
and that kind of thing. It's really impressive, and I would say that it was almost like pulling up my brain to a mind mechanic that just
Yeah.
did
Yeah.
stuff for me,
Yeah.
and,
Right.
like, when my
Yeah.
eyes closed, um, during what I affectionately call happy, sleepy, fun time,
Okay. Right.
or,
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
like, what other people might call trance stuff,
Right. Right. Right.
but my I was totally aware, I was totally present. I felt my breathing, kinda slow. I felt tension release from my body. I was obviously in parasympathetic
Right.
rest, digest, heal mode,
Right.
and, my mind I was clear, I was aware, I was present. I could still think, even though he was speaking to me, I could still think for myself. And soon, though, as he was giving suggestions that my mind just take care of whatever else would be useful in order to stop the functional neurological disorder symptoms and live with more ease and peace and presence,
Hmm.
power, health, clarity, joy, all that. Like I literally felt like a warmth in the back of my skull. It was almost the way that I can describe it is like a hard drive whirring on a computer if it's, like, doing a reprogramming, it's like
Hmm.
or
Right.
something.
Right. Right. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
was consciously aware of it, my eyelids started to kind of rapidly
Oh,
flutter like
that's
somebody
interesting.
in REM sleep,
Right.
and then he was like basically, he told my mind, like, "Hey, when you're done making the adjustments, you can open her eyes," and then it was like, "Bink," like, popped open, and I noticed I could see clearer, like, there was more I don't know, it was just sharper, more rich color vision.
Okay.
I could smell better. It was
Interesting.
almost like a fog, like as if you've had a cold for a long time or something, and
Right.
then
Right.
it's sharper and technicolor vision or something, and I felt I could just somehow tell that if I were to get up and walk around the room backwards or run backwards or be in my wheelchair and have it be moved backwards, that I didn't it's like I felt more sturdy and centered,
Yeah.
whereas what had been happening for almost 2 years before that was that if I took a few steps backwards, if I was in a car when it reversed, if I saw an image of something zoom out, I could immediately have a seizure. So, I ran around the office backwards and I didn't have a seizure, and I have been
Interesting.
seizure free for 15 years.
Wow. So, I mean, it, so we talk about a lot of different. One of my questions is like, did your life works come upon you in a second, like in an epiphany, or
Yeah,
was it incrementally over time? So, I mean, is it incorrect to say that an extraordinary amount of healing took place in really for what when we think about the scope of your life, a moment, I mean, a couple of hours
Yeah.
and that. And we're talking about somebody who is wearing a helmet in a wheelchair. So it's not like you had the sniffles. You had something debilitating, right? I mean, this is
Was very
serious.
bad.
Yeah, it was
I wouldn't
very bad.
recommend it.
Yeah, I mean, what you just described is not something I think you can appreciate, a person can appreciate who hasn't been through it because it sounds so overwhelming. Um, when, uh, so as you, the last 15 years, you had this trauma and you've been seizure free. However, I'm sure there are other things you had to kind of like straighten out over time that,
Mhm.
it wasn't just the seizures, I'm sure. But now you take this experience and you start to help other people. So could you talk a little bit about that?
Well, that's when you talk about the moment, it was there an actual moment? There, like, was in the session halfway through it. I was
Okay.
like so I've been a rapid resolution therapy, specialist now for 15 years,
Hmm.
and I've apprenticed with the guy that I credit to saving my life, the guy that developed rapid resolution therapy.
Okay.
And halfway in the session, when I could tell that the emotions were clearing up and stuff, I was like,
Right.
"Hey, can I learn how to do what you
Yeah.
do?"
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Can I learn
You
this
know, it's
magic?
like,
Right. Yeah.
"This is working better than any other therapy I've tried. I can tell we're already, an hour and a half in."
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I was majoring in psychology, and I had already envisioned being a trauma therapist for people like, and doing missions work, like natural disaster victims, war
Yeah. Right.
refugees, and I wanted to help people with really tough trauma, but I was kinda concerned concerned because 'cause I'm empathetic, and I didn't
Sure.
wanna experience burnout and secondhand trauma, and I could tell since our session was, like, basically almost so fun, I was like, "This would be a fun way to help people."
Yeah.
He's
Yeah.
like, "Well, let's get y'all cleared up, and then sure, I'll train you."
Wow.
So, after 3 months of being totally nightmare, panic attack, symptom free,
Hmm.
I was like, "Okay." I wrote the guy a letter, and I was like, "Can you please train me now?" And he
Right.
was like,
Right. Yeah.
"Okay." So, I, um, basically, at the age of 22, I started. I'm now
Okay.
37, and it's addictive. I can't get enough of even if, like, this specific modality of rapid resolution therapy not doing the trick for a person, like, there's all kinds of nuances and factors, but I just love, um, making sure that people understand that they don't have to suffer with, like,
Hmm.
mental illness and physical illness as much as many people are under the impression because of how crappy, like, the mental health industry and big pharma and oh god, like, it's just a horrible
Yeah.
mess of what's impacting people's health. But there I'm if you don't give up and you keep searching, you will find something.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I think a lot about what you're saying in terms of the, we talk about the vicious cycle, but there's a virtuous cycle, right? I mean, there's things that can be done in a person's life that are less, they're simple but not easy, right? Like I'm a big proponent of food, of your disposition, your sleep, your mental state, and your
Yeah,
eating are inextricably linked, and you can't sort of expect the outcomes of health if your inputs are really pushing you in the opposite direction. And I
right.
think that's true, like if you want to extend the metaphor to just what do you consume by way of information, stimulus in general. Um,
Yep,
and so it sounds to me like you're offering people a new way, a new paradigm of their life. There's a new way to think about it. Um,
yep,
and as the name suggests, rapid resolution, have you seen the same sort of dramatic effect that you experienced in other people? And what does that feel like? I mean, and how do you trust it, right? I mean, because they
yeah.
come to you with a certain expectation, I would imagine, like you're
Mhm.
going to do some magic trick here. And I would, I'm curious about like, are you skeptical sometimes that somebody's just fulfilling your expectation, trying to please you? Like, oh,
Mhm.
you did it, when it's not really sincere. So I'm curious if that dynamic exists, or if people come to you so traumatized that there is no hiding. Like it either, you either find some relief or you don't. So I don't know, could you
Yeah.
talk about that?
Yeah. So first off, um, what I would say is that when people reach out to people like me who do rapid resolution therapy and specialize in it, that it's useful to help manage their expectations and say, yeah, my results were pretty,
Traumatic, yeah.
pretty amazing. I'm one of, and yet, like Dr. Connolly he's been a master at this for 40 years.
Right.
And he is getting really, really amazing results. Maybe not with as many people that have, for instance, did what I did, which is I went and I gave a TED talk about my session.
Right. Yeah.
There might not be as many people shouting from the rooftops about what happened to them, but there still are a lot of video testimonials where, I mean, people are getting the word out. There's so many people doing podcasts like me,
Hmm.
taking up our time trying to let people know that, hey, this is an effective modality. There's clinical studies being done on it now. But
Yeah.
it's the thing, though, there's a couple of things for people to know that um, I would think that just like any other really of the more effective, innovative therapeutic approaches that are happening these days that aren't Freudian traditional stuff that's just like delving into the problems without any kind of science of how do we rewire somebody's
Yeah.
neural pathways, retrain their nervous system. It's useful in a session to do something in a bite-sized chunk.
Right.
Like you have a single incident trauma, we're going to clear the impacts from this particular trauma. We're going to clear this particular troubling emotion
Yeah. Okay.
about this particular thing. There it is useful for us to screen out for people that their symptoms are because of heavy metal poisoning, a traumatic brain injury, nutritional
Yes.
deficiencies. I take good care to make sure that it's an appropriate thing that I can tell I can get this client results with. I
Yeah.
check in consult and stuff for people to see do they have reasonable enough emotional intelligence, skills, self-awareness that they can communicate well with me when I ask them questions.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Right. Right.
So typically, if there is a person that has a big problem with not wanting to disappoint, they're a people pleaser,
Yeah.
maybe like a young kid, like a 13-year-old or something like that,
Right. Yeah.
or I try to let people know, "Hey, this is not about my ego. If something that can affect our results is that if I ask you a question, you give me the accurate answer, like including, hey, now, if you try to pull up that feeling, what do you notice now? I want the
Right.
honest answer so I know because I see it as my responsibility to get the shift for you.
Right.
So sometimes people, just because of the science of this and what's going on in the brain, sometimes they will, of course, need more follow-up sessions and things to help hold the changes that we did and make it
Yeah.
stronger over time, right? But anyways, I usually can tell if somebody is, um, basically trying to appease and please, and they're
Yeah.
not actually checking in and giving me accurate this body language, tonality, stuff like that.
So inversely, have you seen that shift happen, but the person not recognize what just happened? Like,
Yes,
I mean,
that
yeah. So
happens sometimes.
tell me about that. Like, they're better, but they're so locked into
Yeah.
the point of view that this being better is that one of their assumptions. Like, this is my life. So what happens then?
So we do some things with this specific modality of rapid resolution therapy, which again, it can have some overlap into maybe some other hypnotherapy or neurolinguistic programming techniques, but it is unique in the fact that are um, we are taking a baseline at the beginning of a session in a way that is getting communication, engagement, participation from somebody's unconscious mind. There's a special technique and a tool that we use. Um, at the end of the session, we check back in with this thing that I will call a baseline. which is
Hmm.
different than just the person feeling a feeling.
Okay.
And we check and see how that baseline has changed. It's a visual kind of baseline. It's something that they see. And that what they see is an indicator of how their mind has been problematically processing the data you and I could call memory, imagination, or meaning,
Hmm.
a thought, what something
Okay.
might mean. And so usually we can check in several different ways, like, hey, when you remember that now, can you bring up that disturbing emotion?
Right.
And usually it's shifted by at least 70%. Sometimes people are like, where did it go? I can't find it. I'm trying really hard. Sometimes a disturbing thought that they had about something doesn't seem true anymore. Like they want to laugh. It doesn't feel emotionally on any level like that's a believable thing anymore. Some, and then we also check the visual baseline that is directly from their unconscious mind that's communicating to us in a visual way. And we check to see if that visual image has changed.
Okay.
So that's the best that we can get from just before we part ways after the session has ended. And then we just see how is this showing up over time? Is the change holding? Did something,
Yeah.
interfere? But we want to help people understand that, like, when we tackle things at the level of identity, if a
Right.
behavior or a thought pattern, a feeling has been confused with somebody's like essence of who they are, we
Okay.
want to make so that can reinforce problems if somebody thinks of themselves as anxious. I
Yeah.
think of
Yeah.
myself
Right.
as
Right. Right.
depressed. I think of myself as shy.
Yeah.
It's not who you are, it's a thought pattern, it's a reaction in your body, okay?
Right.
So, like, we do things to address their possibility, like their belief about change. We do things to check and make sure that on every level in their psyche and their mind that they're seeing that the change that we're going for is indeed safe and improves their life and their
Yeah.
health and their well-being.
So assumptions are like, hey, the thing that I'm experiencing is not a thing I'm experiencing, but is who I am. So they're like, hey, anxiety is not who I am. Anxiety is something I'm experiencing, and those things can be separated. I mean, that's sort of a short form of what you just said, I think.
Yeah.
And right, and so figuring out like, well, who's at the center, right? I mean, who's experiencing something, and then what's at the center, and that's a age old, interesting,
Mhm.
hard to like put words around problem, right? I mean, every meditation tradition in the history of meditation is sort of like, oh, your thoughts are thoughts, but you're not your thoughts. I mean, as something,
You're the
right?
observer of your
It,
thoughts, your sensations, your emotions, your body, your life. You're
yeah.
that consciousness, that essence, right? That is experiencing constant peace. But most people haven't really had sometimes enough of an experience
Yes, right.
to get that.
Yes. Yeah, and I mean, that makes I mean, I think there are a lot of analogies to that experience. Like, for example, a good night's sleep. Like, if you haven't had a good night's sleep and you have a good night's sleep, you feel like, do other people experience this? Like, this is how people get up? Like, get up rested, fresh? I mean, I
You're a whole new person, right?
you're
It's like
like, yeah, that's rapid resolution. Like, all of a sudden, your body had a chance to, like, take a I sleep there's no sponsorship here, but I have purchased this thing called 8 Sleep, right? And it one of the things that it does is gives me a score of how well I've slept. Now
nice.
I'm an athlete, so anytime you score something, like I want to do better at it, right? So like score, yeah, like I want to get better sleep just so that way I wake up and I see a better number on my, it says a lot about me probably. But the one of the interesting things about it is that it will measure REM sleep
Mhm,
and deep sleep.
mhm,
And now we've come to understand there's a difference between the two. And deep sleep is more restorative to your body, and something different's going
mhm,
on in REM sleep. But it's when I have a good night's sleep, I get up, I'm a different human being than the days that I get up with that. So when
mhm,
you say, hey, I got this rapid resolution and the world I could see differently, and I can see when I get up after a good night's sleep. my body feels different. I'm able to move through the day
Yep.
different. I think different. Um, the same thing with exercise. I exercise very regularly. It's part of like my routine of living. And when I'm not exercising, I notice. Um, I don't notice it always in the moment, but I feel different. But then when I go exercise, and if I exercise vigorously, the world seems more manageable. I feel less
Uh-huh.
overwhelmed. And that's a rapid resolution to my anxiety of the moment. You know what I mean? So these are things
Yeah.
that are
Yeah.
analogies to like what you're saying to me that bear out
Yeah.
the idea that that could happen at any given scale. It's interesting about the notion of your visual acuity, your visual experience with something, because I'm familiar with the notion of EMDR as a therapy, and
Yeah.
that idea that like how you move your eyes actually connects to part of your brain, and that just by the movement of your eyes and conversation at the same time. I find that interesting just as a similarity to what, to the
Mhm.
story you're telling me. Um, well, someone comes to you, you work with them, you send them on their way uh, in some better condition than you left them. What do you suggest to them to monitor when you say, did it stick or did it hold, or is
Mhm.
this new way of being staying with them? What, because
Mhm.
your life is full of, it should have amplitude. You should have good days and bad days. Not every
Mhm.
day is design. I mean, it's just unnatural to think that. Otherwise, it's a boring life, right? So you have to have some up and down. So how do you teach them to recognize this is ordinary, up and down, and
Yeah,
this is not?
it can depend on, of course, the specific thing, the
Oh,
result that the
okay.
person
Yeah,
is
yeah.
looking for, just, um, like, for instance, some people, it can take a while to develop, uh, all natural analgesia, like pain relief
Yeah.
in their brain, like, that their brain learn how to produce the
Right.
pharmaceutical chemical processes.
Right.
So there might, for instance, for some people, self-hypnosis, techniques that we're doing to, again, get their brain to be able to do what we want it to do. Um, but let's say, I mean, with something really clean and clear, because rapid resolution therapy, we assist people with healing from the traumatic impacts of past experiences. We also apply it to help stop bad habits, like somebody's
Okay.
smoking
Sure.
cessation, sugar addiction, stuff
Right.
like that.
Right.
So usually in those kinds of cases, people can tell, "Oh, I have been going back to doing this bad
Yeah,
habit,"
yeah.
or, "I've been suffering from temptation with it, I haven't given into it yet."
Sure.
So, we can go, "Okay, there's something that we missed that we didn't get to within the first session. There's another chunk of this, another approach to take or something." Um, and same with thought patterns. If somebody has been struggling with a certain kind of thought pattern,
Mhm.
like, even if they've it's affect impacted, like, procrastination, like,
Right.
they want to switch careers and they haven't been
Sure.
taking action, we can usually tell, it's not as big a deal. Like, I can just encourage somebody if they're just still having some thoughts, but they're still pressing through and they're doing like they're not smoking. They are taking action. Even if they feel kind of uncomfortable, I can go, that's just what we would call in psychology and neuroscience extinction behavior. You can
Mhm.
still have some old feelings that get triggered, some old thoughts,
Right.
but if the actual behavior is different now,
Yeah.
right? Then those old neural pathways will eventually die out.
Yeah.
The mind will learn not to cause those same, impulses, emotions, thought
Right.
patterns. But, like, if I'm helping somebody clear, like, nightmares, and we can tell, "Hey, have you had any more
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
nightmares?"
yeah, right, right. Yeah, yeah, it's binary, like, yes or no, like, you had it, you didn't have it. Yeah, and that cleanliness of yes or no, it's good, it's either clearly better or it's clearly not. I think, relative to other types of therapy where it feels like the notion is this is a long process. This is we're
Mm.
gonna. Um, it's interesting this shift towards no. You know what? Like there's a wallowing quality and a reinforcing quality of some of that type of therapy that's not valuable. Um, Now
We
I don't, like I'm a fan of hey, connect to what you've experienced and talk about it. Like I think there's a lot to that, but
Mhm.
this notion of hey, how have things rewired you that you now have to rewire that rewiring seems to be borne out in like very physical ways. I think about the Holocaust. Like I've had people, I've read things that say Holocaust literally changed the DNA of human beings, and then that DNA change actually got reflected out like several generations. So this evil, this trauma, impacted not just those people, but it echoed for a long time.
Mhm.
However, in the naturopathic community, there's this expression like, well, your genes load the gun, but epigenetic, your behavior pulls the trigger, like,
Yeah,
and environment. So, um,
yeah.
yeah, that like idea, like this can be you can shift it. Um,
Mhm.
it's intention with me because I have that sense of like, well, hard work is like you have to do, like is just as my own the way I organize my own thinking about success in any manner. Like, well, you have to grind to get to whatever. However, sometimes I feel like I miss out on the uh, the notion of epiphany, the notion of grace in a certain sense that like in a moment things can happen that then can catapult you well past your own effort. It's just
Well, I it is like there can be such a transformational, powerful experience that it reinforces itself over time. Like
yeah,
for me, Dr. Connolly drove home the point so profoundly to like every facet of my mind and being that it was like these fight, flight, freeze emotions.
hmm,
They had a certain purpose for our ancestors to deal with
yeah,
the
yeah,
predators, the problems that our ancestors could cause, like life or death. Like, do you
right,
need to run and hide, play sick or dead, or bite?
hmm,
It's not useful for at least 99% of modern current issues that
right,
set this stuff off.
hmm, yeah,
Like,
right, right, right,
so my tolerance for my body being affected by stress, like my digestion being affected, my sleep
yeah,
being affected, is so like I would say that my resiliency increased, but it's like I've learned transcendental meditation, I do yoga, I eat
yeah,
well, I
right,
exercise. I will go do a session immediately if something is taking up too much space in my mind,
yeah, yeah,
'cause and I now repeat positive stuff for a living multiple times a day. I'm
right,
sure
right,
that's helped reinforce and protect the neural pathway changes over time, but
sure,
it was like, I will my health is the greatest experience of being myself. Like, when we were talking about who is
right,
somebody, I think of the body as like a car and consciousness is like the driver,
hmm,
and sensations, emotions, thoughts, they're like signals on the dashboard.
hmm,
So, like you said, I if I'm not getting good night's sleep and I feel off, I wanna feel myself again.
right.
I'm gonna take care of that.
Yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think about in my life ways in which I'm counterproductive to my own best interest. For example, I would say to you, like, I'm not the greatest sleeper, but how do I start every day? I start every day with a whole bunch of coffee. And I love drinking that coffee. That coffee makes me happy. I swear to God, I really love starting the day like that. However, there's a counterproductive quality to that, that if I substitute that for something else, it probably served me better at night. I have to say, not to plug this 8 sleep thing again, but,
yeah,
uh,
yeah.
one of the things that it taught me was the sensitivity of my body to alcohol. Like,
Mm,
I think that prior to this, if I s my self-talk would be if I had a beer at 2 o'clock in the afternoon or a cocktail at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, that by the time it's time to go to sleep, that doesn't affect me. Like, it's X number of hours later, there's no way. But what I have learned is that if there's alcohol present anytime in the day, my sleep is screwed up. Now, that's an okay trade sometimes. Like I like to have a good cocktail, and sometimes I might have a couple of cocktails. And I really, really like that, much like the coffee. But it's foolish to think that those consequences all of a sudden don't apply to me. Right? I mean, so, like I sometimes think I have magical thinking where I'm like, well, yes, that's true, but not for me. So I'm gonna have these two margaritas.
Or this time. This
Right, or
time,
this
maybe.
time, yes, exactly. This time's gonna be different. Right, right. 2 sprinkles cupcakes is not going to jack up my sleep, but they do every time. And so I try to, like, just balance all of that, with honesty, like, just, like, go into the circumstance knowing that. Um, okay, so let's say somebody's listening and they're like, "You
Yeah,
know what?
yeah.
I've got, like, something I wanna do this. I could use some rapid resolution." Where would they find you, and
Mm,
how would they reach out? Where would they come look for you?
thank you. Yeah, my website is my name, KristinRivas.com. So that's spelled
Okay,
KristinRivas.com. They There's the TED Talk is called The Life-Changing Power of Words.
okay,
Kristin Rivas at TEDx Rainier. There's also, um, my calendar can get booked out sometimes, too far for a person's level of need. Sometimes they're
sure,
urgently looking for help. So
right,
at rapidresolutiontherapy.com, I think they also have like a domain that points to rapidresolutiontherapy.com called cleartrauma.com. But there's 33 other rapid resolution therapy specialists besides me that might have sooner availability. Um, Anyways, that's a good place to go. And if we do not feel like we have the competency, the skills to get the kinds of results that somebody needs, or
right,
we want to recommend some adjunct therapies and stuff to get the
sure,
person feeling better as soon as possible, we'll refer out. We'll do it. I mean, I'm generous with the knowledge that I've acquired over 15 years of helping people. Um, Including, for instance, the fact that when I was functional neurological disorder has not only been linked to trauma, but also brain and gut inflammation. So
yeah,
sometimes there's issues going on with long haul COVID or somebody's gut health that
yeah,
is causing the symptoms I used to have. So basically, we just want to make sure that people know there is usually solutions to the problems they're experiencing, and we can adjust how their mind is processing things so that they can live healthier, more joyful
yeah,
lives.
yeah, yeah, how nice.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, Kristen, thanks, this was terrific. I appreciate you spending time with us.
I'm so grateful.
Yeah. So today's modern revolutionary is Kristen Rivas, and I hope that she inspires you and that you learn something today. And should you need her services, you go find her. But I also hope that it, inspires you to bring your ideas and your thoughts and passions to the world because the modern revolution needs us all.